The rain pelted down on the concrete sidewalk outside Richardson Corporate Tower as 7-year-old Camille Washington struggled to keep her baby sister dry under her thin jacket. 4-month-old Sophia was wrapped in the only clean blanket they had left, but the rain was soaking through everything. Camille's worn sneakers were completely soaked, and water dripped from her hair into her eyes, but she held baby Sophia close to her chest, trying to shield her from the storm. Inside her pocket, she clutched the crumpled dollar bills she had found under the couch cushions, only $3.47. Not nearly enough for the formula Sophia desperately needed. The baby had been crying for hours because they had run out of milk, and their mother, Denise, had been too sick to get out of bed for 3 days now, burning up with fever and unable to keep anything down. Camille had made the difficult decision to bring Sophia with her because there was no one else to watch the baby. Her mother was delirious with fever, and leaving a 4-month-old alone was impossible. So she had wrapped Sophia in every blanket they owned, put on her own thin jacket, and walked 12 blocks through the pouring rain, carrying her baby sister the entire way. Camille had walked 12 blocks in the pouring rain to reach this gleaming building because she had heard other kids at school talking about the man who owned it. Theodore Richardson was one of the richest people in the city, they said. He lived in a mansion with more rooms than anyone could count and drove cars that cost more money than most people made in a year. If anyone could help her sister, it would be him. But now, standing in front of his building, Camille felt smaller than ever. The security guard inside kept shaking his head at her through the glass, pointing for her to go away. She had been standing there for 2 hours, waiting for someone who looked important enough to help her. Every person in an expensive suit had walked right past her as if she didn't exist. Just when she was about to give up and walk home empty-handed, a black car pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and out stepped a tall man in a perfectly pressed gray suit. His dark hair was slightly damp from the rain, and he moved with the confident stride of someone who owned the world. This had to be him, Theodore Richardson himself. Camille's heart hammered in her chest as she stepped away from the glass doors. This was her only chance. She had to be brave for Sophia, for her mother, for their family. Taking a deep breath, she ran toward the man just as he reached the building entrance. "Please, mister," she called out, her small voice barely audible over the rain and Sophia's crying. "Please, I need your help. My baby sister is so hungry." Theodore stopped in his tracks, looking down at the soaked little girl who was clutching a crying baby to her chest. His first instinct was to keep walking. He dealt with requests for money every day through proper channels, and he had learned to keep moving to avoid being cornered on the street. But something about this child made him pause. Her brown eyes held a desperation he had never seen before, and she was shivering so hard she could barely stand still, yet she held the baby with such protective care that it took his breath away. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" he found himself asking, crouching down to her level despite the rain soaking through his expensive suit. "My baby sister needs milk," Camille said, her words tumbling out in a rush while she continued bouncing Sophia gently. "She's only 4 months old and we don't have any formula left. My mama is real sick and can't get to the store, and I only have $3.47, but the formula costs $8.99, and I don't know what else to do." She tried to reach into her pocket for the money while still holding Sophia securely, managing to pull out the handful of crumpled bills and coins with one hand. "I promise I'll pay you back every penny. I'll do chores or clean or whatever you need. I'm real good at helping and I never break my promises. Please, mister, she's just a baby and she's so hungry." Theodore stared at the money in her outstretched palm while she continued to hold her crying sister against her chest with her other arm. In all his 42 years, through every business deal and charity event he had attended, no one had ever offered to repay him with such earnest determination while simultaneously caring for someone else with such selfless devotion. This little girl, who couldn't weigh more than 50 pounds and was soaked to the bone, was trying to negotiate with him as if she were closing the most important deal of her life, all while never once loosening her protective hold on her baby sister. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "Camille Washington," she replied, standing up straighter despite her chattering teeth. "And my sister is Sophia Washington, and she's the most beautiful baby in the whole world, but she's crying so much because she's hungry and I can't stand it anymore." Theodore felt his heart break a little at the pride in her voice when she talked about her sister. "Camille, I want to help you. But first, let's get you out of this rain. Can you show me where you live?" The little girl's eyes widened with hope. "You mean it? You'll really help Sophia?" "I mean it," Theodore said, surprising himself with how much he meant those words. "Come on, my car is right here." As he opened the car door for Camille, Theodore couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was going to change everything. He had built an empire worth billions of dollars, But somehow, looking at this brave little girl who had walked 12 blocks in the rain for her sister, he felt like he was about to embark on the most important journey of his life. The driver, James, looked surprised when Theodore helped the wet child into the back seat, but he didn't question his boss's instructions to follow Camille's directions to her neighborhood. As they drove through the city streets, Theodore watched the buildings change from gleaming office towers to run-down apartments, and he began to understand just how far this little girl had traveled to find him carrying a baby the entire way. "Tell me about your family, Camille," Theodore said as they drove. "It's just me and Mama and Sophia," Camille explained, gently patting Sophia's back as the baby finally began to quiet down in the warmth of the car. "Mama works real hard cleaning offices at night, but she got sick and missed too many days so they let her go. She's been looking for another job, but it's hard because she has to take care of Sophia during the day, and babysitters cost too much money." Theodore listened to her matter-of-fact explanation of their struggles while watching how naturally she cared for her baby sister. Sophia had stopped crying completely now and was looking up at Camille with the trusting gaze of a baby who knew she was safe in her big sister's arms. "Is Sophia heavy to carry?" Theodore asked gently. "Sometimes," Camille admitted honestly. "But she's my sister so I don't mind. Mama says that families take care of each other no matter what, and Sophia can't take care of herself yet, so it's my job to help." "Here," Camille said, pointing to a narrow apartment building that had seen better days. "We live on the 3rd floor, apartment 3B. As Theodore looked up at the building, he realized he was about to enter a world completely different from his own. But for the first time in years he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Theodore followed Camille up the narrow stairs, noting how the banister wobbled under his hand and how the hallway lights flickered with each step. The building smelled of cooking food and cleaning supplies, and he could hear the sounds of daily life through thin walls, televisions playing, children laughing, and somewhere above them, a baby crying. "That's Sophia," Camille said, quickening her pace as they reached the 3rd floor. "She gets real loud when she's hungry." Camille fumbled with a key that looked too big for her small hands, and Theodore realized she had been carrying the responsibility of the household on her 7-year-old shoulders. When the door finally opened, he was struck by how clean and organized the small apartment was, despite its obvious age and wear. The crying had stopped during their car ride, but he could see that Sophia was still fussy in Camille's tired arms. "Mama?" Camille called out as she carefully maneuvered through the doorway while holding Sophia. "I found help. I found someone to help Sophia." Theodore heard a weak voice respond, and then Camille reappeared, still carrying Sophia and leading a woman who looked like she should have been in bed. Denise Washington was clearly beautiful. Even in her current state her dark skin had a sickly pallor, and she moved carefully as if every step hurt. But her eyes held the same determination Theodore had seen in her daughter's face. "Camille, what did you do?" Denise asked, her voice hoarse. She looked at Theodore with a mixture of embarrassment and concern, then immediately moved to take Sophia from Camille's arms. "Sir, I'm so sorry if my daughter bothered you. She's just worried about her sister, but we don't need." "Mama, this is Mr. Richardson." Camille interrupted excitedly, finally able to stretch her tired arms now that Sophia was safely with their mother. "He owns that big building downtown, and he's going to help us get milk for Sophia." Denise's eyes widened as she recognized the name, and Theodore could see her trying to straighten her appearance despite her illness. "Mr. Richardson, I apologize. My daughter shouldn't have." "Please don't apologize," Theodore said quickly. "Your daughter is remarkable. She walked 12 blocks in the rain to ask for help for her sister. I've never met anyone so brave." The baby's cries intensified, and Theodore could see the pain in both Camille's and Denise's faces. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the bedroom. Denise hesitated, but Camille was already pulling him toward the doorway. "Come see how pretty she is, Mr. Richardson." In the small bedroom, Theodore saw a crib that had been lovingly decorated with handmade decorations and drawings. Inside, a 4-month-old baby with the biggest brown eyes he had ever seen was crying with the desperate sound of true hunger. Despite her tears, Theodore could see that Sophia was indeed beautiful, with her mother's delicate features and her sister's expressive eyes. "She's been crying for hours," Denise said softly, coming to stand beside the crib. "I tried to make the formula stretch, but there's nothing left." Theodore felt something shift inside him as he looked at this tiny baby and the family that was struggling so hard to care for her. He had spent his entire adult life building wealth and success, but he had never felt as purposeful as he did in this moment. "I'm going to the store right now," he said, pulling out his phone. "James, I need you to find the nearest grocery store and wait for me there." Mr. Richardson, you don't have to, Denise started to protest. I want to, Theodore said firmly. Camille made me a promise that she would pay me back and I believe her. But right now, Sophia needs formula and you need groceries and I can help with that. He turned to Camille, who was watching him with hopeful eyes. I'll be back in 30 minutes with everything your sister needs. Can you take care of your mama while I'm gone? Yes, sir. Camille nodded eagerly. I'm real good at taking care of people. As Theodore headed for the door, he heard Denise call out weakly, Mr. Richardson, why are you doing this? He turned back to see the woman who was clearly struggling to stay upright, holding her hungry baby while her 7-year-old daughter stood beside her like a tiny guardian angel. Because sometimes the most important things in life come from the most unexpected places, he said. And your daughter just taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn. 45 minutes later, Theodore returned with James and 2 full carts of groceries. He had bought not just formula for Sophia, but fresh fruits and vegetables, meat, bread, milk and everything else a family with children might need. He had also stopped at a pharmacy to pick up medicine for Denise's fever and some children's vitamins for Camille. This is too much, Denise protested as they brought bag after bag into the apartment, but her voice lacked conviction as she watched Theodore prepare a bottle for Sophia. Mama, remember what you always tell me about accepting help when it's offered with a good heart? Camille said wisely, already helping to put groceries away. Theodore smiled as he handed the prepared bottle to Denise. Your daughter is not only brave, she's smart too. As Sophia finally quieted down and began drinking hungrily, the tension in the small apartment seemed to lift. Denise sank into a chair with visible relief, and Camille bounced excitedly around the room, chattering about all the food they now had. I don't know how to thank you, Denise said, looking up at Theodore with tears in her eyes. You have no idea what this means to us. I'm starting to understand, Theodore replied, watching as Sophia's tiny hand wrapped around her mother's finger. And Camille, don't forget you promised to pay me back. The little girl nodded solemnly. I never forget my promises, Mr. Richardson. I'm going to figure out how to pay you back for all of this. As Theodore looked around the small apartment now filled with food and hope, he realized that Camille had already begun to repay him in ways she couldn't possibly understand. For the first time in his adult life, he felt like he was part of something that truly mattered. The next morning, Theodore found himself thinking about the Washington family before his feet even hit the floor. He had barely slept, his mind replaying the image of little Sophia drinking her bottle and the relief in Denise's eyes. During his morning run through his expansive estate, he couldn't stop thinking about the 3-room apartment where a family was starting their day with full stomachs for the first time in weeks. By 10 o'clock, he had made a decision that would have shocked his business partners. Instead of heading to his office, he drove back to Camille's neighborhood with more supplies, children's books he had ordered online, some toys for Sophia, and a basket of fresh fruit. When he knocked on the door of apartment 3B, he heard hurried footsteps and hushed voices before Camille opened the door with a huge smile. Mr. Richardson. You came back, she exclaimed, then called over her shoulder, Mama, he came back to see us. Denise appeared in the doorway, looking significantly better than she had the day before. Her fever had broken, and though she still looked tired, there was color in her cheeks again. She was wearing a clean dress and had obviously made an effort with her appearance. Mr. Richardson, she said, her voice stronger than before. You've already done so much for us. You didn't need to come back. I wanted to check on Sophia, Theodore said, holding up the bag of gifts. And I brought a few things for the girls. Camille's eyes lit up when she saw the books, and she immediately began looking through them with the excitement of a child who rarely received new things. Mama, look. There's one about a princess who saves her kingdom. Denise watched her daughter with a soft smile, but Theodore could see the conflict in her eyes. Pride was warring with gratitude, and he understood that accepting charity wasn't easy for someone who had always worked hard to provide for her family. Denise, he said gently, using her first name for the first time. May I ask you something? She nodded, settling Sophia on her hip as the baby gurgled happily. What did you do before Sophia was born? I was a night janitor at the Meridian office complex, Denise replied. I cleaned offices from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid decent and I could take care of Camille during the day. Theodore nodded, understanding the careful balance she had maintained. And when Sophia came along? I tried to keep working, but babies don't sleep on schedules, Denise said with a tired smile. I couldn't find reliable overnight childcare I could afford, and I started missing too many shifts when Sophia was sick or when Camille needed me for school things. Eventually they had to let me go. Have you been looking for other work? Day jobs don't pay enough to cover childcare for 2 kids, Denise explained practically. And most places that pay decent wages want someone who can work nights or weekends, which means leaving the girls alone. I can't do that to Camille, she's already had to grow up too fast. Theodore watched Camille, who was now sitting on the floor reading to Sophia from one of the picture books. The 7-year-old was using different voices for each character, making her baby sister laugh and clap her tiny hands. It was clear that Camille adored her role as big sister, but Theodore could also see the weight of responsibility in her young shoulders. What if I told you I might have a solution? Theodore asked carefully. Denise's eyes sharpened. What kind of solution? My company needs someone to coordinate our employee family services program. It's a day job, Monday through Friday, with good benefits and childcare assistance. The person would help organize family events, coordinate with local schools for employee children, and manage our community outreach programs. Denise stared at him for a long moment. Mr. Richardson, I don't have experience in that kind of work. I clean buildings, I don't coordinate programs for wealthy families. You've been coordinating your family's life under impossible circumstances for months, Theodore pointed out. You've kept your children safe, healthy, and happy despite every challenge thrown at you. You've raised a daughter who's brave enough to walk 12 blocks in the rain to save her sister. I think you're exactly the kind of person we need. Camille looked up from her book, having caught the tone of their conversation. Mama, Mr. Richardson wants to give you a job? It's not charity, Theodore said quickly, seeing the hesitation in Denise's face. It's a real job with real responsibilities. You'd be helping families throughout our company navigate resources and support systems. The pay is competitive, and there's a child care center right in our building. You could bring Sophia to work with you? Camille asked excitedly. And I could visit after school? The child care center serves children from 6 weeks to 12 years old, Theodore confirmed. Camille could do her homework there after school if you wanted, or take the bus home if you preferred. Denise was quiet for several minutes, bouncing Sophia gently as she processed the offer. Theodore could see her weighing her pride against her children's needs, and he held his breath waiting for her answer. What's the catch? She finally asked. No catch, Theodore said honestly. I need someone who understands what families are going through, someone who can connect with parents and children from all kinds of backgrounds. Your experience gives you something my other employees don't have. You know what it's like to struggle, and you know how to find solutions even when everything seems impossible. Camille had abandoned her book and was now looking back and forth between her mother and Theodore with hopeful eyes. Mama, you always tell me that when good opportunities come along, we should be grateful and take them. Denise looked down at her older daughter, then at baby Sophia, who was reaching for the colorful pictures in the book Camille had been reading. You really think I could do this job? I think you'd be amazing at it, Theodore said sincerely. And I think Camille would be proud to see her mama helping other families the way you've always helped yours. When would I start? Denise asked, and Theodore knew she had made her decision. Whenever you're ready, he replied. We could start with a few days a week while you get settled, then move to full-time when you're comfortable. Denise took a deep breath, then looked directly into Theodore's eyes. Mr. Richardson, I accept your job offer. And I promise you won't regret giving me this chance. I know I won't, Theodore said, feeling a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with business success and everything to do with the smile spreading across Camille's face. I told you I'd find a way to pay you back. Camille declared triumphantly. Mama, getting a good job is the first part of keeping my promise. As Theodore watched the little girl hug her mother and baby sister, he realized that Camille was keeping her promise in ways she didn't even understand yet. She had given him something he hadn't even known. He was missing, a sense of purpose that went far beyond profit margins and board meetings. 3 weeks into Denise's new job, Theodore found himself looking forward to his visits to the employee child care center more than his board meetings. He had started stopping by every few days, officially to check on how the new family services coordinator was settling in, but really because he had become enchanted with watching the Washington family flourish. Denise had thrown herself into her new role with an enthusiasm that impressed everyone in the building. She had already reorganized the entire family resource database, created a newsletter for employee parents, and started a support group for single mothers in the company. Her combination of practical experience and genuine caring had made her popular with employees at every level. Mr. Richardson. Camille called out as he entered the bright, cheerful child care center. She was sitting at a small table doing homework while Sophia played in a nearby bouncy seat. Look what I got on my math test. She held up a paper with a bright red A+ at the top, and Theodore felt a surge of pride that surprised him with its intensity. "That's fantastic, Camille. Your hard work is paying off." "Miss Jennifer says I'm catching up real fast," Camille said proudly. "She says maybe I can even skip ahead if I keep working this hard." Theodore had quietly arranged for Camille to receive tutoring through the company's education assistance program, something Denise had accepted after he explained it was available to all employees' children. Watching Camille's confidence grow as her academic skills improved had been one of the most rewarding experiences of his life. "Where's your mama?" Theodore asked, settling into one of the child-sized chairs beside Camille's table. "She's meeting with Mrs. Patterson from the marketing department," Camille explained. "Mrs. Patterson's little boy has been having troubles at school, and Mama knows how to help because she helped me when I was having troubles too." Theodore smiled at the 7-year-old's matter-of-fact explanation of her mother's work. Camille had adapted to their new circumstances with the resilience of childhood, but Theodore could see how much more relaxed and happy she had become in just 3 weeks. "Mr. Richardson," Camille said, lowering her voice conspiratorially, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. Are you lonely?" The question was so direct and innocent that Theodore was momentarily speechless. "What makes you ask that, Camille?" "Well, you come visit us a lot and you always look happy when you're here, but then when you have to go back to your office you look sad again. And Mama says you live in a big house all by yourself, which sounds lonely to me." Theodore felt something twist in his chest. This perceptive little girl had seen through all his professional success to something he had been trying to ignore for years. "Sometimes I do feel lonely," he admitted. "Maybe you could have dinner with us sometime," Camille suggested hopefully. "Mama makes the best spaghetti, and now we have enough food to share with company. You could meet our neighbors too. Mrs. Rodriguez makes cookies, and Mr. Thompson always has funny stories." The idea of having dinner in the small apartment, surrounded by the warmth of the Washington family and their neighbors, sounded more appealing to Theodore than any of the exclusive restaurants he usually frequented. "I would love that," he said, meaning it more than he had meant anything in years. "Would you ask your mama if Saturday night would work?" Camille's face lit up. "Really? You'll really come eat dinner at our house?" "If your mama says it's okay, I'll be there." Just then, Denise appeared in the doorway with Mrs. Patterson, both women looking relieved and energized. Theodore watched as Denise listened intently to something Mrs. Patterson was saying, nodding and taking notes. Her professionalism and genuine concern for the woman's situation were evident in every gesture. After Mrs. Patterson left, Denise approached their table with baby Sophia in her arms. "Mr. Richardson, I didn't expect to see you today. I wanted to check on how things were going," Theodore said, standing up from the tiny chair. "And Camille just invited me to dinner on Saturday if that's okay with you." Denise looked surprised but pleased. "Of course. We'd love to have you. It won't be fancy. Mama makes the best spaghetti in the whole world," Camille interrupted proudly. "And I can help make garlic bread, and Sophia can show you how she can sit up by herself now." "It sounds perfect," Theodore said, and he meant it. As the week progressed, Theodore found himself looking forward to Saturday night with an anticipation he hadn't felt since childhood. He had eaten in the finest restaurants around the world, but the thought of sharing a home-cooked meal with the Washington family felt more special than any 5-star cuisine. On Saturday evening he arrived at apartment 3B with flowers for Denise and a new picture book for Camille. The small apartment was filled with the most wonderful smells, and he could hear laughter coming from the kitchen. "Mr. Richardson." Camille threw open the door and hugged his legs before he could even step inside. "Perfect timing. Mama just finished making the sauce." The apartment looked even cozier than before, with candles on the small dining table and soft music playing in the background. Denise appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron and looking more beautiful than Theodore had ever seen her. "Welcome to our home," she said warmly, accepting the flowers with a genuine smile. "I hope you're hungry." As they sat around the small table, Theodore holding Sophia while Denise served dinner, he felt a contentment he had never experienced in his luxurious mansion. Camille chattered excitedly about school, Sophia babbled and grabbed at everything within reach, and Denise shared stories about her work and the family she was helping. "This is the best meal I've had in years," Theodore said honestly as he took another bite of the perfectly seasoned spaghetti. "Really?" Camille asked with wide eyes. "Better than fancy restaurant food?" "Much better," Theodore confirmed, "because the best part of any meal is the company you share it with." As the evening continued, with Camille reading her new book aloud and Sophia falling asleep in Theodore's arms, he realized that these simple moments of family life were what he had been searching for his entire adult life without even knowing it. When it was time for him to leave, Camille hugged him tightly. Thank you for coming to our home, Mr. Richardson. Will you come back again? If you'll have me, Theodore replied, looking over her head at Denise, who was nodding with a warm smile. As he drove home to his empty mansion, Theodore realized that everything had changed. For the first time in his life, he understood what home really meant, and it had nothing to do with the size of the house or the cost of the furniture. It had everything to do with the people who filled it with love. Over the next few weeks, Saturday dinners at apartment 3B became the highlight of Theodore's week. He found himself declining business dinners and social events that had once seemed important, preferring instead to spend his evenings helping Camille with her homework or playing peekaboo with Sophia while Denise cooked dinner. The relationship between the three of them had evolved into something comfortable and natural. Theodore no longer felt like a visitor in their home. Camille had designated a special chair as Mr. Theodore's chair, and Sophia would light up with smiles whenever she saw him walking through the door. "I've been thinking," Denise said one Saturday evening as they cleaned up after dinner, "about finding a larger apartment. Sophia's getting bigger and she'll need her own room soon." Theodore, who was drying dishes while Camille gave Sophia a bottle, looked up with interest. "Have you found anything you like?" "There are a few places in the same school district," Denise replied carefully. "Nothing too expensive, but maybe a 2-bedroom with a little more space." Theodore had been hoping she would bring up the subject of moving. He had several properties that would be perfect for the family, but he knew Denise's pride well enough by now to approach the subject delicately. "You know," he said casually, "my company owns several apartment complexes around the city. We offer housing assistance to employees as part of our benefits package." Denise stopped washing dishes and turned to look at him. "What kind of housing assistance?" "Reduced rent, security deposit assistance, that sort of thing. It's particularly generous for employees in management positions like yours." "Am I in a management position?" Denise asked with surprise. "You're coordinating an entire department now," Theodore pointed out. "The Family Services program has expanded so much under your leadership that we're going to need to hire additional staff soon." This was true. Denise's natural talent for understanding what families needed had made her invaluable to the company. She had created programs that other businesses were already asking to copy, and employee satisfaction surveys consistently praised her work. "There's a complex about 10 minutes from here," Theodore continued. 3-bedroom units with a playground and a community center. Very family-friendly. 3 bedrooms? Camille looked up from feeding Sophia with interest. "Would I get my own room too?" "You sure would," Theodore said with a smile. "And Sophia could have a nursery, and your mama could have a proper master bedroom." Denise was quiet for a moment, considering. What would the rent be? Theodore named a figure that was actually less than what she was currently paying for their cramped apartment. He had made sure the company's housing assistance program was generous enough to make it work within Denise's budget. "That seems too good to be true," Denise said suspiciously. "It's a real employee benefit," Theodore assured her. "We've found that when our employees have stable, comfortable housing, they're happier and more productive at work. It's good business." "Can we go see it?" Camille asked excitedly. "Please, Mama? I want to see what my room would look like." Denise looked at her daughter's hopeful face, then at baby Sophia, who was gurgling contentedly in Theodore's arms. "I suppose it wouldn't hurt to look." The next afternoon, Theodore picked up the family and drove them to Riverside Gardens, a well-maintained complex with tree-lined streets and children playing in the courtyards. The apartment he showed them was bright and spacious, with large windows and modern appliances. "This would be Camille's room," Theodore said, opening the door to a sunny bedroom that was larger than the entire living area of their current apartment. Camille ran to the window which overlooked the playground. "I could watch other kids playing and maybe make friends." The master bedroom was equally impressive, with enough space for a proper dresser and reading chair. But it was the nursery that made Denise's eyes fill with tears. "Sophia could have her own space," she whispered, imagining her baby daughter crawling around the safe, carpeted room. "She could learn to walk without bumping into furniture every 2 feet. What do you think?" Theodore asked as they stood in the bright living room with its open kitchen and dining area. "I think it's beautiful," Denise said honestly. "But I need to make sure I understand all the terms and conditions before I make a decision." "Of course," Theodore replied. "Take all the time you need." But Camille had already made up her mind. "Mama, look." She was standing in the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets with wonder. "There's room for all our food and there's a dishwasher and the refrigerator is huge." That evening, after Theodore had driven them home and left them to discuss the decision privately, Camille climbed onto her mother's lap as Denise sat feeding Sophia. "Mama, Do you think we should move to the new place? What do you think, sweetheart? I think it would be nice to have my own room and Sophia would have more space to grow up. But I also think Mr. Theodore is being extra nice to us because he likes us, not just because of business. Denise looked down at her perceptive daughter with surprise. What makes you say that? The way he looks at you when you're talking, Camille said matter-of-factly. And the way he smiles when he holds Sophia. And the way he always asks what you think about things like your opinion really matters to him. Denise felt her cheeks warm. She had noticed Theodore's attentiveness too, but she had been trying to convince herself it was just his natural kindness. Camille, Mr. Theodore is just being a good friend to our family. Maybe, Camille said thoughtfully. But I think he likes being here with us more than being in his big house by himself. And I think you like having him here too. Before Denise could respond, Camille continued, I think we should take the apartment. Not because Mr. Theodore offered it, but because it would be good for Sophia and for you and for me. And if Mr. Theodore helped make it possible, then we should be grateful and say yes. 2 weeks later, Theodore helped them move into their new home at Riverside Gardens. He had insisted on hiring professional movers, despite Denise's protests that they didn't own enough furniture to need professional help. But when the movers arrived, they brought not just the Washington family's belongings, but also new furniture that Theodore had quietly arranged to be delivered. This is too much, Denise said as she watched the men set up a beautiful crib for Sophia and a desk for Camille's homework. It's not charity, Theodore said firmly. It's a housewarming gift from someone who cares about your family. Camille was running from room to room, marveling at having space to spread out her books and toys. Sophia, meanwhile, was fascinated by the sunlight streaming through the large windows, reaching her tiny hands toward the dancing dust motes. I don't know how to thank you for all of this, Denise said as they stood together watching her daughters explore their new home. You don't need to thank me, Theodore replied. Seeing all of you happy is thanks enough. That evening, as they sat in the new living room eating pizza to celebrate their first night in the apartment, Camille made an announcement. I figured out how I'm going to pay Mr. Theodore back, she declared solemnly. Oh really? Theodore asked with amusement. What's your plan? I'm going to make sure you're never lonely again, Camille said with the serious tone of someone making a sacred vow. Mama says the best way to pay someone back for kindness is to give them something they need, and you need a family. Theodore felt his breath catch in his throat. Out of the mouths of babes came truths he hadn't been ready to admit to himself. Camille, Denise said gently, Mr. Theodore might want to find his own family someday. But we could be his family, Camille said simply. If he wants us to be. The room fell quiet except for Sophia's happy babbling as she played with her new toys. Theodore looked at Denise, who was studiously avoiding his gaze, her cheeks pink with embarrassment. Camille, Theodore said carefully, that's the most beautiful offer anyone has ever made me. But that's a decision all the grown-ups would have to make together. Well, you should think about it, Camille said practically. Because we love having you here and you love being here, and that seems like the most important parts of being a family to me. As Theodore tucked Camille into her new bed that night, she whispered sleepily, Mr. Theodore, do you think dreams come true? I'm starting to believe they do, he whispered back, kissing her forehead goodnight. Walking back to the living room where Denise was folding baby clothes, Theodore realized that everything Camille had said was true. He did love being there. He did feel more like himself in this modest apartment than he ever had in his mansion. And somewhere along the way he had begun to think of these 3 remarkable females not just as people he was helping, but as the family he had never known he wanted. The question now was whether Denise felt the same way, and whether he was brave enough to find out. 3 months into living at Riverside Gardens, the Washington family had settled into a comfortable routine that somehow always seemed to include Theodore. He had started joining them for Sunday morning walks to the nearby park, where Camille would play on the swings while he pushed Sophia in the baby swing and Denise read on a nearby bench. Theodore's own routine had completely transformed. He left work earlier, declined most evening business functions, and found himself looking forward to simple pleasures he had never noticed before, like listening to Camille read her homework aloud or watching Sophia discover her own toes. Mr. Theodore, Camille said one Sunday as they were walking back from the park, when are you going to ask Mama to marry you? Theodore nearly tripped over his own feet. Camille. What? The 8-year-old said innocently. You love her, don't you? Denise, who was carrying Sophia, stopped walking and stared at her daughter. Camille Washington, that is not appropriate. But it's true, isn't it? Camille continued with the relentless logic of childhood. Mr. Theodore comes to dinner every week, he helped us move to a better home, he plays with Sophia like she's his own baby, and he always makes sure you get the best pieces of everything when we eat. Those are things friends do for each other, Denise said weakly. Mrs. Rodriguez says that when a man brings you flowers every week and looks at you like you're the most beautiful woman in the world, he's not thinking about friendship, Camille replied matter-of-factly. Theodore felt his face burning. He had indeed been bringing Denise flowers every week, and he was fairly certain his feelings were written all over his face every time he looked at her. But hearing it analyzed by an 8-year-old made him realize how obvious he had become. Camille, people's relationships are complicated, Denise started. Not really, Camille interrupted. Do you love Mr. Theodore? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Theodore found himself holding his breath, waiting for Denise's answer. Camille, that's enough, Denise said firmly, but Theodore caught the way she avoided looking at him directly. That evening, after Theodore had gone home to his empty mansion, Denise found herself thinking about her daughter's blunt questions. The truth was, she had been wondering the same things herself. Somewhere between the first desperate night when Theodore had helped them and now, her feelings for him had evolved from gratitude to something much deeper and more complicated. She loved the way he listened to Camille read with genuine interest, never talking down to her or dismissing her ideas. She loved how gentle he was with Sophia, supporting her head just right and making silly faces that sent the baby into fits of giggles. She loved his quiet sense of humor and the way he seemed to truly enjoy their simple family dinners more than whatever fancy events he was missing. But she also worried that his interest in their family was born out of loneliness rather than genuine love. Theodore had everything money could buy, but he had no family of his own. Was he drawn to them because he truly cared, or because they filled a void in his otherwise successful but empty life? Meanwhile, Theodore was pacing around his mansion asking himself the same questions. He had been telling himself that his feelings for Denise were based on admiration for her strength and character, but Camille's direct questioning had forced him to admit the truth: he was completely in love with the remarkable woman who had raised such an extraordinary daughter. The next morning, Theodore made a decision that surprised even him. Instead of going to his office, he drove to Riverside Gardens and knocked on the door of apartment 3B. Denise answered in her work clothes, clearly preparing to leave for the office. Sophia was on her hip, and Camille was finishing her breakfast at the kitchen table. Theodore, Denise said with surprise. Is everything okay? You never come by on Monday mornings. I need to talk to you, Theodore said, his heart pounding. About what Camille said yesterday. Mr. Theodore. Camille called from the kitchen. Are you finally going to tell Mama you love her? Camille. Denise scolded, but Theodore stepped into the apartment and closed the door behind him. Actually, yes, he said, looking directly at Denise. I am. The apartment fell completely silent except for Sophia's babbling. Denise stared at Theodore with wide eyes, clearly not having expected such a direct approach. Denise, Theodore said, his voice steady despite his racing heart, I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your dedication to your children. I love the way you make me laugh and the way you challenge me to be a better man. I love coming home to your family because with you, I finally understand what home means. Denise set Sophia down in her high chair and took a step closer to Theodore. Theodore, I love Camille like she's my own daughter, Theodore continued, and I love watching Sophia grow and learn. I love the chaos of family dinners and homework time and Sunday mornings at the park. I love all of it because I love all of you. Camille had abandoned her breakfast and was watching the scene unfold with fascination. What are you going to say, Mama? Denise looked at her older daughter, then at baby Sophia, who was reaching her arms toward Theodore with a happy squeal. Finally, she looked back at Theodore and he saw tears in her eyes. I love you too, she whispered. I've been trying to talk myself out of it for weeks, but I love you too. Theodore felt like his heart might explode with joy. Really? Really? Denise said with a shaky laugh. I love how you see Camille as brilliant instead of just chatty. I love how you hold Sophia like she's precious instead of fragile. I love that you choose to spend your evenings helping with homework instead of attending fancy parties. Does this mean you're going to get married? Camille asked hopefully. Theodore and Denise looked at each other and burst into laughter. I think we should probably start with dating, Denise said. But we've been doing that for months, Theodore pointed out. We just called it something else. True, Denise agreed, stepping closer until she was within arm's reach. So what do we call it now? Now we call it love, Theodore said, reaching up to cup her face in his hands. And we see where love takes us. As he leaned down to kiss her for the first time, Camille cheered and Sophia clapped her hands, and Theodore knew that this was exactly where he was meant to be, surrounded by the family he had found in the most unexpected way, all because a brave little girl had asked him for help on a rainy day. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and smiling, Camille made another announcement. "I think this counts as paying you back, Mr. Theodore," she said seriously. "I promised you wouldn't be lonely anymore, and now you won't be because you have us forever." "Forever sounds perfect," Theodore agreed, pulling both Denise and Camille into a hug while Sophia babbled happily from her high chair. For the first time in his adult life, Theodore understood that he had everything he could possibly want, and it had nothing to do with money or success. It had everything to do with love, and the family that had chosen him just as much as he had chosen them. 6 months after Theodore's confession of love, life had settled into a beautiful rhythm for the extended family. Theodore had essentially moved into the apartment at Riverside Gardens, though he maintained his mansion for business purposes. Most evenings found him helping Camille with her increasingly advanced homework while Denise cooked dinner and Sophia played on the living room floor. The change in Theodore hadn't gone unnoticed at work. His employees commented on how much happier and more relaxed he seemed, and his business partners were amazed by his new perspective on work-life balance. Several major decisions he made during this period, inspired by his understanding of what families really needed, ended up being his most successful ventures. "I have some news," Denise announced one evening as they sat around the dinner table. Sophia, now 10 months old and sitting in her high chair, was cheerfully throwing pieces of food on the floor while Camille tried to teach her to say please. "Good news or challenging news?" Theodore asked, automatically wiping sweet potato off Sophia's chin. "Good news, I think," Denise said with a smile. "The board of directors wants to expand the family services program company-wide. They want to implement it in all 12 of our regional offices." Theodore set down his fork and stared at her. "Denise, that's incredible. Do you realize what that means?" "It means a promotion, a significant raise, and probably some travel to help set up the programs," Denise said, though she looked slightly overwhelmed by the prospect. "It means you've created something that's going to help thousands of families," Theodore said proudly. "I'm so proud of you." Camille, who had been listening intently, asked the practical question. "What about Sophia when you have to travel? And what about me?" "That's what we need to figure out," Denise said. "I can't take this promotion if it means leaving you girls too much." Theodore reached across the table and took her hand. "What if you didn't have to figure it out alone?" Denise looked at him questioningly. "What if we made this family official?" Theodore said, his heart racing as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "What if we got married and then every decision we made together?" The room fell completely silent. Even Sophia stopped throwing food and stared at the adults with wide eyes, as if she sensed the importance of the moment. "Theodore," Denise whispered, staring at the ring box he had placed on the table between them. "Marry me, Denise," Theodore said, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring. "Not because it would solve logistical problems, but because I can't imagine my life without you and the girls. Marry me because we love each other, and because we make each other better, and because Camille and Sophia deserve to have a father who will love them unconditionally for the rest of their lives." Camille had abandoned all pretense of eating and was bouncing in her chair with excitement. "Say yes, Mama. Say yes." Denise looked at the ring, then at Theodore, then at her 2 daughters. "You really want to be their father? Even when Sophia's teething and crying all night, and when Camille goes through her teenage years and thinks we're both completely embarrassing?" "Especially then," Theodore said with a laugh. "I want all of it, the good days and the challenging days and everything in between. I want to be the man they call Dad, and I want to be your husband. And I want to be your wife," Denise said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Theodore. Yes, I'll marry you." As Theodore slipped the ring onto her finger, Camille cheered so loudly that Sophia started clapping and babbling excitedly, though she clearly had no idea what was happening. "When can we have the wedding?" Camille asked immediately. "Can I be a bridesmaid? Can Sophia be a flower girl? Can we have cake?" Theodore and Denise looked at each other and burst into laughter. "We can have whatever kind of wedding you want," Theodore said to Camille, "as long as it includes all of us becoming a real family." "We've been a real family for months," Camille pointed out practically. "Now we're just going to have a party to celebrate it." 3 months later, they held their wedding ceremony in the community center at Riverside Gardens, surrounded by neighbors who had become friends and co-workers who had become family. Camille, dressed in a beautiful blue dress, served as Denise's maid of honor, while Sophia, in a tiny white dress, was carried down the aisle by Mrs. Rodriguez. The ceremony was simple but perfect. Theodore had written his own vows, promising not just to love and cherish Denise, but to be the best father he could be to Camille and Sophia. Denise's vows included a promise to help Theodore understand that the most important success in life was measured in love rather than dollars. But the most memorable moment came when the officiant asked if anyone had anything to add to the ceremony. Camille stepped forward, cleared her throat importantly, and addressed the gathered crowd. "I want everyone to know that Mr. Theodore, Dad, kept his promise too," she announced solemnly. "A long time ago, I promised to pay him back for helping our family, and I said I would make sure he was never lonely again. But he promised us something too, even though he didn't say it out loud. He promised to love us no matter what, and he kept that promise every single day." She turned to Theodore with a smile. "So now we're all even, and we can just love each other forever without anybody owing anybody anything." As Theodore knelt down to hug his new daughter, feeling Denise's hand on his shoulder and hearing Sophia babbling happily in Mrs. Rodriguez's arms, he realized that Camille was absolutely right. They were all even now, and they could spend the rest of their lives simply loving each other. The reception was held in the courtyard, with music and dancing and more cake than 3 families could possibly eat. As the sun began to set, Theodore found himself swaying on the makeshift dance floor with Denise in his arms while Camille twirled around them and Sophia clapped from her stroller. "Happy?" Denise asked, looking up at her new husband. "Completely," Theodore replied, spinning her gently. "I never knew life could be this good." "Neither did I," Denise admitted. "Thank you for seeing something in us worth loving. Thank you for letting a lonely billionaire become part of your extraordinary family," Theodore replied, kissing her forehead as Camille grabbed his hand to pull him into a silly dance move she had learned at school. As the evening wound down and their guests began to head home, the new family of 4 sat together on a blanket in the courtyard, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Sophia had fallen asleep in Theodore's arms, and Camille was curled up against Denise's side. "What happens now?" Denise asked quietly. "Now we live happily ever after," Theodore said simply. "Just like Camille's storybooks." "Do you really think it will be that easy?" Denise wondered. "I think it will be exactly as easy or as hard as we make it," Theodore replied. "But I think with enough love and patience, we can handle whatever comes our way." Camille, who had been listening with drowsy contentment, made one final pronouncement. "I think we're going to be the best family in the whole world." As Theodore looked at his wife and daughters, surrounded by the friends and neighbors who had welcomed him into their community, he knew that Camille was absolutely right. They were going to be the best family in the world, not because they were perfect but because they were exactly what each of them needed. 1 year after their wedding, Theodore and Denise had settled into married life with the kind of natural ease that made their friends comment on how perfectly matched they were. Theodore had sold his mansion and moved permanently into a larger apartment in the same complex, wanting to stay in the community that had become so important to all of them. Camille, now 9 years old, had blossomed into a confident, academically gifted child who served as an unofficial welcome committee for new families moving into Riverside Gardens. She took her role as big sister to Sophia very seriously, teaching the toddler new words and making sure she always had her favorite stuffed animal at nap time. Sophia, meanwhile, had developed into a cheerful, curious 15-month-old who had clearly inherited her mother's determination and her adopted father's charm. She had taken her first steps toward Theodore, much to his delight, and her first word had been "Dada," which had made him cry happy tears for 10 minutes. It was during this period of domestic bliss that Theodore began to notice changes in himself that went deeper than just happiness. For the first time in his adult life, he found himself thinking about legacy in terms of more than just business success. He wanted to build something that would make his daughters proud, something that would show them the importance of using privilege to help others. "I've been thinking about the family services program," he said to Denise one evening as they cleaned up after dinner. Camille was in her room reading and Sophia was playing with blocks on the living room floor. "What about it?" Denise asked, loading dishes into the dishwasher. "What if we expanded it beyond just our company? What if we created a foundation that could help implement family support programs in businesses across the country?" Denise paused in her work and turned to look at him. "That would be a massive undertaking. It would also help thousands of families like ours used to be," Theodore pointed out. "Families where parents are struggling to balance work and childcare, where children are going to bed hungry because there aren't enough resources." He could see the spark of interest in Denise's eyes as she considered the possibilities. "We would need to research existing programs, develop implementation guidelines, create training materials. We could start with a pilot program in 5 companies," Theodore suggested. "See what works and what doesn't, then refine the model before expanding." "It would mean a lot of travel for me," Denise said thoughtfully. "A lot of time away from the girls." It would mean a lot of families getting the help they need, Theodore countered gently. And the girls are old enough now to understand that sometimes important work requires sacrifice. That night, after both girls were asleep, Theodore and Denise sat on their small balcony talking through the details of what such a foundation might look like. As they planned and dreamed together, Theodore felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond anything he had experienced in his business career. "You know what I realized today?" he said as they were getting ready for bed. "What's that?" "I spent 43 years trying to prove I was successful, and I never once felt successful until I met Camille on that rainy day." Denise smiled as she brushed her teeth. "And why do you think that is?" "Because success isn't about what you accumulate," Theodore said, watching her in the bathroom mirror. "It's about what you give away. And more than that, it's about who you become in the process of giving." "Look at you getting all philosophical," Denise teased, but her eyes were warm with affection. "Camille made me philosophical," Theodore admitted. "That little girl saw something in me that I didn't even know existed. She believed I could be someone worth loving, and somehow that made it true." 3 months later, the Richardson Family Foundation officially launched with Theodore as chairman of the board and Denise as executive director. Their first pilot program was implemented in 5 companies across 3 states, providing childcare assistance, family counseling services, and emergency support for employees facing hardship. The night before Denise left for her first major business trip to check on the pilot programs, Theodore found himself feeling anxious in a way he hadn't experienced since the early days of their relationship. "I'm going to miss you," he admitted as they lay in bed together. "I'll only be gone for 4 days, Denise reminded him, though she sounded like she was trying to convince herself as much as him. "I know. It's just, I've gotten used to having you here every day. We all have. The girls will be fine. Camille is practically a built-in babysitter now, and you're better with Sophia's bedtime routine than I am." "It's not about managing the logistics," Theodore said, pulling her closer. "I'm going to miss talking to you at the end of the day. I'm going to miss watching you read stories to Sophia, and hearing you help Camille with her math homework." Denise was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I'm scared too." "Scared of what?" "Scared that I'm not qualified for this. Scared that I'm going to mess up something important because I'm just a woman who used to clean office buildings." Theodore turned to face her fully. "Denise, you are one of the smartest, most capable people I know. You've already proven that you can create programs that change lives. These companies asked for your help specifically because of what you've accomplished. But what if you succeed beyond your wildest dreams and help thousands of families in the process?" Theodore interrupted gently. "What if you become exactly who you were meant to be?" The business trip was a tremendous success. Denise returned home energized and full of ideas for expanding the foundation's reach. She had stories about families whose lives were already being transformed by the programs, and she had commitments from 3 additional companies to participate in the next phase. "I missed you all so much," she said as she hugged each of them in turn, "but I also felt like I was doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And we're proud of you for doing it," Theodore said, meaning every word. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table listening to Denise describe her trip while Sophia banged her spoon enthusiastically and Camille asked detailed questions about the different cities she had visited, Theodore felt a contentment so complete it almost took his breath away. This was what he had been searching for his entire life without knowing it, not just love, but purpose shared with people who mattered. Not just success, but the kind of meaningful work that would make the world a little better for children like Camille and Sophia. As he looked around the table at his wife and daughters, Theodore realized that his feelings had evolved far beyond what he had expected when he first fell in love with Denise. He didn't just love her, he admired her, respected her, and was constantly amazed by her strength and wisdom. He didn't just love being a father to Camille and Sophia, he was proud to be their father, and excited to see what kind of remarkable women they would become. These unexpected feelings of deep partnership and shared purpose had transformed not just his personal life, but his understanding of what it meant to live a meaningful life. And it had all started with a desperate little girl who had believed he could help, and had been brave enough to ask. 2 years into their marriage, Theodore woke up one Saturday morning with a realization that hit him like a bolt of lightning. As he watched Denise getting Sophia dressed while Camille read a story aloud from her bed, he understood that what he felt for his family had grown into something even deeper than he had thought possible. It wasn't just love anymore, it was a profound sense of belonging, of purpose, of having found his place in the universe. Every decision he made now was filtered through the lens of what would be best for his wife and daughters, and somehow that had made him a better man than he had ever been when he only had to consider himself. "Daddy, you're staring at us," Camille observed with the directness that had never left her, though she now channeled it into advanced reading and mathematics that impressed her teachers. "Sorry, sweetheart," Theodore said, sitting up in bed. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am." "We're all lucky," Camille replied matter-of-factly. "But especially Sophia because she gets to grow up with a daddy from the very beginning. I had to wait 9 whole years to get one." Theodore's heart clenched at the casual way Camille referred to him as her daddy. The adoption papers had been finalized 6 months ago, making it official, but she had been calling him dad since their wedding day. "Are you sad about that?" Theodore asked gently. "Nope," Camille said, bouncing Sophia on her lap. "Because waiting made me appreciate it more. And besides, if you had been my daddy from the beginning, you might not have been the right daddy for me. You had to become the right daddy first." Denise, who had been listening to this conversation while braiding Sophia's hair, met Theodore's eyes in the mirror and smiled. "She's got a point." "She always does," Theodore agreed, getting out of bed to join his family. As he approached them, Sophia reached for him with a delighted squeal of "Daddy" that made his chest tight with emotion. Later that morning, as they walked to the park for their traditional Saturday outing, Theodore found himself overcome with the need to tell Denise something he had been feeling but hadn't known how to put into words. "Can we sit for a minute?" he asked when they reached their favorite bench overlooking the playground. "Sure," Denise agreed, settling beside him while they watched Camille push Sophia on the baby swing. "Is everything okay? You seem different today." "I am different today," Theodore said honestly. "I woke up this morning and realized something that I need to tell you." Denise turned to face him, concern flickering in her eyes. "What is it?" "I need to tell you that everything I thought I knew about love was wrong," Theodore began. "Before I met you and the girls, I thought love was about finding someone who made you happy. I thought it was about compatibility and shared interests and physical attraction." Denise's brow furrowed slightly. "Theodore, you're starting to worry me." "Don't be worried," he said quickly, taking her hands in his. "What I realized this morning is that what I feel for you and Camille and Sophia is so much bigger than anything I thought love could be. It's not just that you make me happy, it's that you make me better. It's not just that I love being with you, it's that I can't imagine being anyone else when I'm not with you." He paused, trying to find the right words for feelings that seemed too big for language. "When Camille asked me for help that day in the rain, I thought I was just giving money to a child who needed formula for her baby sister. But what actually happened was that your family saved me from a life that looked successful on the outside but was completely empty on the inside." Denise's eyes filled with tears as she listened. "I need you to know that every day I wake up grateful that Camille was brave enough to ask for help, and that you were strong enough to let me become part of your family. I need you to know that being your husband and their father is the greatest honor of my life." "Theodore," Denise whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not finished," he said gently. "I also need to tell you that I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the work you're doing with the foundation, I'm proud of the mother you are, and I'm proud to be married to someone who makes the world better just by being in it." Denise was crying openly now, but she was smiling too. "How do you always know exactly what I need to hear?" "Because I pay attention," Theodore replied, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "Because you and the girls are the most important thing in my life, and when something is that important to you, you pay attention to every detail." Just then, Camille ran over to their bench with Sophia in her arms. "Mama, why are you crying? Did Daddy say something mean?" "No, sweetheart," Denise laughed, accepting Sophia's enthusiastic hug. "Daddy said something beautiful." "He says beautiful things all the time," Camille observed. "Like when he tells us bedtime stories about princesses who save kingdoms with kindness instead of swords. Or when he tells you that your hair looks pretty even when you haven't brushed it yet. You notice everything, don't you?" Theodore asked, lifting Camille onto his lap. "It's important to notice when people love each other," Camille said seriously. "Because then you can learn how to love people the right way too." That afternoon, as they walked home from the park with Sophia napping in her stroller and Camille skipping ahead to collect interesting leaves, Denise slipped her hand into Theodore's. "I have a confession too," she said quietly. "Oh really? I used to lie awake at night wondering if this was all too good to be true. Wondering if someday you would realize that we were just a project to you, or a way to fill time until you found someone more suitable for a man of your position." Theodore stopped walking and turned to face her. "And now? Now I know that we chose each other," Denise said simply. "Not because any of us needed to be rescued, but because we recognized something in each other that made us complete. Camille saw your kindness, I saw your heart, and you saw a family worth loving." "Worth loving doesn't even begin to cover it," Theodore said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "You're worth everything." As they continued walking home, Camille ran back to join them, her pockets full of colorful autumn leaves. Are we going to have hot chocolate when we get home? Absolutely, Theodore replied, because Saturday afternoon hot chocolate had become one of their most treasured family traditions. With marshmallows? With marshmallows, Denise confirmed. And whipped cream for Sophia to smear all over her high chair? And whipped cream for Sophia to smear all over her high chair, Theodore agreed with a laugh. As they reached their building, Theodore looked up at their apartment windows and felt the same sense of homecoming he experienced every time he returned to the people who had become his whole world. 3 years ago, he had been a successful but lonely man who thought he had everything he needed. Now he understood that everything he had needed was walking beside him, skipping ahead of him, and sleeping peacefully in the stroller he was pushing. The confession he had made to Denise that morning hadn't been about admitting new feelings, it had been about acknowledging that the feelings he had been living with every day were deeper and more transformative than he had ever imagined love could be. And the most beautiful part was that he could see in Denise's eyes, in Camille's easy affection, and in Sophia's reaching arms that they felt exactly the same way about him. 5 years after that first rainy day encounter, Theodore stood in the kitchen of their home. They had eventually bought a house in the same neighborhood as Riverside Gardens, watching his family prepare for what had become their most cherished tradition, the annual Promise Day celebration. It had been Camille's idea, of course. 3 years ago, when she was 10, she had declared that they should celebrate the anniversary of the day she had made her promise to repay Theodore's kindness. What had started as a simple family dinner had evolved into a day of giving back to their community, followed by an evening of storytelling and gratitude. Daddy, can you help me carry these? Camille, now 12 and every bit as determined as she had been at 7, was loading care packages into boxes. Each package contained formula, baby food, diapers, and a note that read, "Every child deserves to be loved and cared for. Pass it on." "Of course, sweetheart," Theodore replied, lifting the heavy box with ease. He still marveled at how naturally the word "daddy" came from both girls, and how completely right it felt every time he heard it. Sophia, now 3 years old and a perfect combination of her mother's fierce independence and Theodore's gentle thoughtfulness, was helping by carrying a single packet of crackers with tremendous seriousness. "I'm helping too," she announced proudly, her vocabulary having exploded over the past year into full sentences that never failed to delight her family. "You're the best helper," Theodore assured her, kissing the top of her head as they loaded everything into the car. Their first stop was the community center, where they volunteered once a month, distributing food and supplies to families in need. Theodore had initially worried that seeing other families in situations similar to what the Washingtons had faced might be difficult for Denise and the girls, but instead, it had become one of their most meaningful activities. "Mrs. Johnson, we brought extra diapers today," Camille said to the center coordinator, a kind woman who had become a family friend. And Sophia helped pick out some books for the little kids. As they worked together setting up tables and organizing donations, Theodore found himself reflecting on how much had changed since that first desperate encounter. The Richardson Family Foundation, now operated in 43 states, had helped implement family support programs in over 200 companies, and had directly assisted more than 10,000 families. But more than the professional success, Theodore was amazed by the personal transformation that had occurred in all of them. Denise had grown from a struggling single mother into a confident leader whose expertise was sought after by corporations and government agencies alike. Camille had blossomed into a compassionate, brilliant young woman who already talked about becoming a social worker so she could help families like theirs used to be. And Sophia was growing up with a security and confidence that came from knowing she was loved unconditionally by parents who chose each other and chose her every single day. "Mr. Richardson," a young woman approached him as he was stacking boxes of baby formula. "I wanted to thank you for what your foundation did for our family. The child care assistance program at my company made it possible for me to go back to work after my son was born." "You don't need to thank me," Theodore replied automatically, but the woman shook her head. "Yes, I do. Because I know this all started with your own family story, and it gives me hope that good things can happen to people who are struggling." As Theodore watched the woman walk away to help her toddler son, he felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came whenever he was reminded of how far they had all come. That evening, as was tradition, the family gathered in their living room for the storytelling portion of Promise Day. Each year, they took turns sharing their favorite memories from the past 12 months and talking about their hopes for the year to come. "I'll start," Camille declared, settling cross-legged on the carpet with Sophia in her lap. "My favorite memory this year was when Sophia took her first steps at the foundation office and all the employees started crying happy tears." "That was pretty special," Denise agreed, smiling at the memory of their toddler wobbling across the conference room into Theodore's waiting arms while a room full of business executives cheered. "My turn," Sophia announced, though her version of storytelling was still more like enthusiastic babbling punctuated by recognizable words. "Daddy, park, ice cream. Mama, books, love." "I think she covered all the important things," Theodore laughed, settling beside Denise on the couch. "My favorite memory," Denise said thoughtfully, "was the day we got the letter from the White House asking me to consult on national family policy initiatives. Not because of the recognition but because Camille read the letter and said, 'See, Mama? I told you that you were smart enough for anything.'" All eyes turned to Theodore for his contribution to the tradition. "This year my favorite memory happened just last week," he began. "Sophia was playing with her toys and Camille was doing homework at the kitchen table, and you were making dinner while telling me about your day. It was completely ordinary and completely perfect, and I realized that 5 years ago I didn't even know that kind of happiness existed." The room fell quiet except for the soft sounds of Sophia playing with her stuffed animals. "But I think," Theodore continued, "that every year my real favorite memory is the same one. It's the day a brave 7-year-old girl asked me for help and changed everything." Camille looked up at him with a grin. "Did I really change everything?" "You changed everything," Theodore confirmed. "You showed me what courage looked like, what family meant, and what it felt like to be needed for something that actually mattered. And you kept your promise too," Camille said seriously. "You promised to help Sophia, but you ended up helping all of us become the people we were supposed to be." As the evening wound down and they tucked both girls into their beds, Sophia in the nursery that had been lovingly decorated with artwork from all their travels, and Camille in her room that was filled with books and science projects and dreams of changing the world, Theodore and Denise found themselves alone on their back porch, looking up at the stars. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Camille hadn't been brave enough to approach you that day?" Denise asked, curled up against Theodore's side. "Never," Theodore replied without hesitation. "Because I believe that we were meant to find each other. Maybe not that exact day in that exact way, but somehow, somewhere we would have found each other." "You really believe that?" "I believe that some people are meant to be family, even if they don't start out that way," Theodore said, kissing the top of her head. "I believe that love finds a way, especially when there are children involved who need it to find a way." "Speaking of children," Denise said with a smile in her voice, "Camille asked me yesterday when we were going to give her another sibling." Theodore sat up straighter. "She did. She said that Sophia needs someone closer to her own age to play with, and that she's getting old enough to help with 2 little ones instead of just one." "And what did you tell her?" "I told her that was a conversation for Mommy and Daddy to have together," Denise replied. "So, what do you think?" Theodore was quiet for a moment, imagining their family growing even larger, their house filled with even more laughter and chaos and love. "I think," he said slowly, "that Camille is probably right. She usually is." "So we're going to try for another baby?" Denise asked, turning in his arms to face him. "We're going to let love decide," Theodore said, echoing the philosophy that had guided every major decision in their relationship. "And whatever happens, we'll handle it together as a family." As they sat together under the stars, planning for a future that seemed to hold endless possibilities, Theodore thought about the promise that had started it all. Camille had promised to repay his kindness, but she had given him so much more than repayment. She had given him a purpose, a family, and an understanding of what it meant to live a truly meaningful life. The 7-year-old who had walked 12 blocks in the rain to ask a stranger for help had kept her promise in ways she probably still didn't fully understand. She had indeed made sure he was never lonely again, but she had also taught him that the best way to never be lonely was to open your heart wide enough to let in all the love the world had to offer. And as Theodore looked through the window at his sleeping daughters and felt his wife's hand in his, he knew that this perfectly imperfect, beautifully chaotic, endlessly loving family was everything he had never known he was looking for. The promise had been kept, the debt had been paid, and now they could spend the rest of their lives simply loving each other with the kind of fierce, unconditional love that makes families out of strangers and turns ordinary days into the stuff of fairy tales. In the end, it turned out that the little girl who had begged for milk money had given him something far more precious. She had given him home.